The spotlight in Washington is squarely on first-year Democratic Representative Cori Bush. The Missouri progressive successfully pressured the Biden administration to issue a fragile extension of the eviction moratorium with a 5-day protest outside the Capitol. But now Republicans are seizing on comments the lawmaker made last week on CBSN, in which she said she's spent $70,000 on private security. They claim it's hypocrisy because of Bush's support for the defund the police movement. Bush told my colleagues Anne-Marie Green and Vladimir Duthier she hired the security in part because she has received death threats, including from police officers.
Is that what you want to see? You want to see me die? You know, because that could be the alternative. So either I spent $70,000 on private security over the last few months, and I'm here standing now and able to speak, able to help save 11 million people from being evicted, or I could possibly have a death attempt on my life. I won't let them get that off. You can't get that off. I'm going to make sure I have security because I know I have had attempts on my life and I have too much work to do. There are too many people that need help right now for me to allow that. So if I end up spending $200,000, if I spend $10 more on it, you know what? I get to be here to do the work.
Let's bring in Joel Payne and Leslie Sanchez now, both of whom are in Washington. Joel is a CBS News political contributor and Democratic strategist. Leslie is a CBS News political analyst and Republican strategist. Welcome to both of you. Great to see you. Leslie, let me start with you. Republicans are already using these comments by Bush to hit Democrats on the broader defund the police movement. Recent polling shows a majority of Americans oppose the movement, but do support shifting funds toward community policing and social services. Do you expect the GOP will make policing a central part of their midterm push?
This is absolutely turning out to be one of the most critical areas, not only from that polling, but from internal Republican polling that says there continues to be a rift on how policing is perceived. If you look at the fact they're going to argue that many of the blue states that have cut over $1 billion in police funds from their municipalities have seen, conversely, an increase or an uptick in crime. And this particular scenario, it's a perfect example of saying, do as I say, not as I do. If somebody has the advantage and the ability to afford their own private security, then that's wonderful for their situation. But for communities, and especially communities of color that do not have those resources, it's a pain that goes too far in terms of how they're expected to deal with a lack of police enforcement in their communities and some of the challenges. So the issues that rose in terms of fairness and social justice have not changed, but the solution of how you get to that and defunding the police not being one of those alternatives is where the rift is going to be and why you're seeing more support among not only Republicans, but certainly some communities of color on this particular issue.
And Joel, should Democrats be worried if the 2022 midterms become a referendum on public safety and policing? How do you think Democrats avoid that framing?
You know, I love this topic because it feels like it's one of these things that people in Washington, D.C., people who are, Republican Party strategists like to spin up as if there's a big rift in the Democratic Party about the defund the police movement. The fact is, the standard bearer of the Democratic Party, the most popular Democrat in America, the man who got 80 million plus votes, what was it, just 9 months ago, is very much in line with where the rest of the public is. He wants to invest smartly in public safety. He does not support defund the police. In fact, the majority of Democrats don't support defund the police. What I find is interesting is two things. One, Cori Bush gained notoriety because she saved 11 million people from being kicked out of their homes through her advocacy for the eviction moratorium being extended. And Republicans have shifted right past that into this kind of red herring issue. I guess the second piece of this is it's very hard to have moral high ground on this issue if you're a Republican when you've spent the last 7 months defaming the Capitol Police that defend you every day and that were attacked on January 6th. And you're questioning their loyalty and their honor and their work. You won't defend the police, but you want to go and talk about defund the police, which is a red herring issue. So I think it's a tough issue long term to pass the smell test for Republicans to try to put out there. I'm sure they will. But the fact is the majority of Democrats are aligned with the mainstream of the country on this.
And so, Leslie, interestingly, when we talk about, hypocrisy, it's something that both sides of the aisle use and accuse the other side of in various reasons. We know that just this week, Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell voted to said that he wouldn't work with Democrats to raise the debt ceiling after he voted to do just that during the Trump administration. And of course, there were many who pointed to the Republicans' reaction, as Joel pointed out, to the January 6th attack as not sufficiently backing the blue, as it were. So, I mean, do you think Republicans have to tread lightly with a message of hypocrisy here, especially since it doesn't seem that hypocrisy, when one side accuses the other side of it, really moves the needle that much when it comes to voters?
Yeah, it's one of those arsenals, a weapon in your arsenal that has the impact of a cotton ball. And when people yell hypocrisy, I mean, I think sensibly folks can agree that both sides point the finger at each other, not recognizing they point three fingers back at themselves. That's what hypocrisy is in Washington talk. And that is where that undercurrent of frustration with these kind of talking points, with these kind of messages, are exactly what contributed to the rise of Donald Trump in 2015 in the first place. It was the idea that Washington is going back to usual. They can't fix themselves. They can't police themselves. They have this consistent hypocrisy. So there's definitely a framework on both sides where people look at Washington politicians through that lens. The interesting aspect of this, and to my wonderful friend Joel Payne, and I agree with so much of what he says because he's such an astute thinker on the left and for Democrats. I would say that the part about this where it gets mischaracterized is to say that Republicans are now, because of January 6th, not going to support law enforcement, that they are not going to support their states that are dealing with these particular issues right now, is kind of missing the point that this is an area where so many communities frame it as they do not have law enforcement protection, public safety in their communities. And while it's seen as an advantage, again, pointing to the representative who can afford their own private care, and it's great that this person is doing important things in Washington, they would argue their life is just as valuable. So that's the part where it is an effective message for Republicans, and I do not expect it to be walked away from anytime, certainly not leading up to midterms.
Right. And Joel, putting aside the effectiveness of any one specific piece of messaging, there's no question Democrats are concerned about a repeat of 2010, in which the party was blown out in the House. Politico reports Representative Sean Patrick Maloney, the leader of the DCCC, believes the party needs a message reboot to promote President Biden's agenda among swing voters. What do you believe? First of all, do you believe it does need a message reboot? And if it does, what would that message reboot look like?
Yeah, I've seen a lot of talk of this, and obviously in the circles that I run in, this is a big topic of whether or not we're going to repeat the mistakes of the past. I'm somewhat of an expert on this because I was in Harry Reid's Senate Majority Leader office in 2009, 10, and 11, so very up-close personal seat to this. And my sense of what happened then was that Democrats were not willing to stand by the work that they did. Democrats walked away from talking about and bragging about the great work of the Affordable Care Act, of the Wall Street Reform Bill, of repealing Don't Ask, Don't Tell, all the things that a Democratic-led, Barack Obama-led majority was able to accomplish in that cycle. And I actually think one of the things that Joe Biden and his team have done really effectively is talk positively and lean into where the country is. The country supports spending on infrastructure, fixing COVID, addressing COVID. They even support doing things like raising the minimum wage. So there are very popular issues that Joe Biden can stand behind, but he has to lean into it. And I think the good news for Democrats is that so far he's done that. Obviously, there's a long time between now and Election Day 2022, but I think that's the primary issue. Are Democrats going to guide the public on where to be on these issues, or are they going to follow where the narrative goes? You don't follow the narrative a lot of times, or rather, you want the narrative to follow reality. You don't want to be in a situation where you're following the narrative, and I think that's what Democrats' big challenge is here.
All right. Well, Joel Payne and Leslie Sanchez, thanks to the both of you. Always a pleasure to see you both. Thank you.
Thanks.